there are physical practices we can do, emotional practices, mental practices, and spiritual practices. So in these practices, the physical dimension mein asanas, more of using body. The non-negotiable thing could be a really asanas, and on top of that, depending on one's appetite, one's interest in this thing, people can explore with their body. It's like it could be dance, it could be gardening, cooking. It's more of using body practices depending on one's own conditioning. So these to more get in touch with body, like physical aspect. Then the emotional this thing, it's the Navarasas thing. We live through all, right from the moment we wake up till the moment we sleep. There is one rasa or the other, or combinations of rasas which will be playing. So it's becoming more in touch with the rasa combinations which we are more inclined to exhibit. And in this part of the journaling in the evening, we can really explore for few days could be conflicting interactions where we exhibited certain things, and we can really isolate the rasa or isolate what we were exhibiting and really look in the evening, like two interactions.
The whole of learning theatre is working with the Navarasas.
Okay, I don't know.
Yeah.
So, and in the mental aspects, it's reading, really as a study, not like reading as a bedroom reading, but it's like really study. It could be Yoga Sutras, or it could be in process labs. It could be different prescribed books could be there as a proper study. And then as spiritual practices, it's like what I got to know from people's comments about process labs. It's more to do with really listening properly. So I feel that Yoga Sutras and this it's more like Yoga Sutras, we listen inside. Really, we silence ourselves and we listen, essentially. And in the process, we listen to other person's inside. So it's essentially process lab and Yoga Sutra is just it completes the yin yang, completes the cycle. In Yoga Sutra, we go inside and listen. In the process lab, we go to the inside of the other this thing. So it's this practice of Yoga Sutras, listening, really listening in life, can be indulged in.
Okay, the question that our group deliberated was, how do we deal with the paradox in hierarchy with this learning? And with this learning. Yeah, so
it's fine, that's fine.
So hierarchy was essentially the teacher-learner hierarchy that gets created in the learning. And of course, when we said learning, we took the context of both process work as well as Yoga Sutra, which was the discussion that we had. Clearly, it was felt that hierarchy is a reality, which is a reality, ongoing reality. It will be a demon which will be present, very, very difficult to do away with the demon. We looked at both the Yoga Sutra method of teaching learning and the process work method of teaching learning. So what we said in the Yoga Sutra method of teaching learning as it exists, it's clearly the teacher taking a position of I know, saying to the learner, you don't, hence listen to me. There is a very high possibility, which our group believed, that the teacher may come primarily from a theoretical perspective with little or any application knowledge, may not be practicing what he or she is preaching. Yoga Sutra. And even, and I'm staying with the Yoga Sutra way of learning teaching, we are saying that there is a variance in the context of the teacher and the student, where the teacher is coming from and where the student is. Clearly resulting into injunctions, shoulds, musts, an authority figure, power showing up for sure. What are the ways out there is essentially for the teacher to come down to, let's say, chapter 1 or chapter 2, if that's where the student is, creating assignments for the student at that level, and then through the assignment or the learn by doing method, elevate the learner to the next level. and be humble enough to say that if it is going to take time, it's going to take time. The agenda to be driven largely from the learner perspective. Democratizing learning in that space is possibly the only way of doing it. In the process way we were looking at is clearly learning through experiences of the group is the approach taken, and to that extent fairly democratized compared to Yoga Sutra. But there is clearly an underlying danger that primarily maybe because of the participants' position in a group setting, the expert, the process consultant expert, the process worker or the facilitator does get put up on the pedestal. And very high likelihood that the expert there or the teacher there taking the hierarchical positioning and for whatever reasons. So what we said as a group was clearly to live with the fact that hierarchy will be present, and the possible way of doing away is through have a dialogue of the nature of a typical Janaka Sabha that we were discussing, where people who are invited to the dialogue space do have in some sense a similar level in the hierarchy of the learning. Otherwise, it was reflected that in this space that was created here in the last 3.5-4 days, there was a non-agreement. There's no consensus of view over here, but there were two divergent views in our group that the experience over here was possibly of a panel discussion among experts, where many of the participants in the group were mere listeners, probably coming here to seek knowledge and kind of take away from the well, and which is a feeling that was left with. Clearly saying that hierarchy, if we have to deal with necessary preconditions, and we thought that it is an ideal way of looking at it, but we thought we'll at least put up the ideal here, that humility and compassion on the part of the teacher is a must, with a fundamental belief of saying, thank you for giving me an opportunity to share this knowledge with you. Even the learner would have to come with not only the gratitude for receiving, but also believing that at the end of the day, the teacher is also a human being, and having a compassion to the teacher as well, and not kind of creating that hierarchy in their minds as well. So I don't know if I have covered everything here. Yeah, the primary questions which got invited, if dialogue is the way to try and address the hierarchy issue, look at questions like who is getting invited to the dialogue, where are they coming from vis-a-vis the subject of the dialogue, what are their experiences, what are their dilemmas, so that there is a fairly peer level intense debate. And I kind of pick Raghu's word, which is not discussed over here, that not just heat, but along with the heat, a light would also emerge at the same time. Anything that I would...
I just want to, one thing that came up was that the intention of the teacher in this case, the person who's imparting or sharing this knowledge, could either stem from Swarth or from Paramarth. And that is an answer which goes back to that integrity issue, which only I can know. And because of which the practice of all this would be this, or any sadhana is very imperative, because that person needs to be at that position in his or her own psyche, where they can be very true to themselves as to why they are wanting to create this space or this transfer of information. So is my intention to get a label that I am a teacher in yoga and I'm the missionary kind of a thing? Or is it truly that I am the channel for disbursement of this knowledge?
One thought I had was during the lab encounter, there may be certain hurts or wounds created in that here and now as well. And obviously because of the power equation or the pedestalization, or because you're processing a certain issue, those are not addressed. Those that are created in the here and now process. So the way every day we have a faculty debrief meeting in the evening, can there be a space for a session debrief for the group where they may be able to give some feedback or express their whatever got created for them vis-a-vis the facilitator in that moment, so that there is that dialogue created, and so the facilitator also gets a mirror reflection of some of the things that, of course his intention of touch was different, but it obviously got received differently. So it also helps the facilitator remain open to self-growth rather than becoming, I've now spoken, everything I've spoken has to be received, and if you're not receiving it properly, it's because you've got an issue. So I think that reverse channel of feedback is not available, and we have so many sessions, and then we have community sessions. So and taking it offline, taking it out of the here and now loses its impact, that I don't want to walk up to somebody in a corner and say it doesn't make sense. So I think if that would be a small thing that could get introduced in our labs.
It was on how do we deal with the hierarchy of evolution itself. See, we looked at this whole issue of the discomfort at the word of hierarchy itself, why it is creating so much dissonance, that was discussed. So we looked at various things. Initially we looked at how it gets practiced in one, say, Swastika's, this thing, how as convivial as it is, from a patriarchal hierarchical model, how it gets dealt with, and their own experiments and struggles and whatever were explored. But the issue is in terms of hierarchy as its experience as a social construct, and the deep coding vis-a-vis the whole nature being itself hierarchical, from the whole issue of differentiation, integration at a higher level kind of thing, like, So I is the whole issue of holons and things like that. So I is part of the body, I is wholesome in itself, but being part of the body, it's a part. So the whole issue of, we looked at this thing of shifting to holarchy, because hierarchy is deeply coded, so the power issues alone gets this thing thrown at it kind of thing. So if you look at that as one issue of looking at least destigmatizing this whole issue of this thing, that's one area we looked at. And the other thing is in terms of kind of a menu of progress. So, see, there is a learner and there is a learning process, and there is a interface from a teaching or whatever, from a resource position. There is a learner and he taps some resource. So there is a learner's progress. I mean, evolution probably looks like this, but as a learner's progress, the needs are different. So an initiate might need a guru kind of thing. Say, like, buddy, this is how you must walk, or hold the hand kind of thing, and just make the initial push kind of thing to, as the person progresses, probably that need will be replaced with simple supervision, which can be tapped into, and mentoring, which can be relied upon, and also at a stage of companionship. Then finally reaching a level of fellowship with the resource from where the learning is, or the learning is drawn. It may be an individual. When we talk about the teacher, it's an individual. Or if it is a system, then that interface, how these, these varying requirements of the person's progress can be provided for from the medium that is giving this particular opportunity to learn and progress. So that, if it can be made available in detail, like a matrix or whatever, from where people can look at it and explore.
They will get a role clarity as a learner. That's what you want to say, right?
No, see, a person is progressing. So the issue is we seem to be getting caught with one end to the other kind of thing. So at least when I am saying the Yoga Sutra or process work, see, process work, at least we have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 kind of thing. So what is the need of a phase 1 thing, and what is the resource position? Is it there, what he was talking about, a bit of hierarchical mode, guru mode or whatever? May not be, I'm using a word for just this thing. And
clear. I understand.
That is clear, So that's one thing we looked at. And the issue of anchoring. So it's easy to say anchoring. Then how anchoring can express itself, as you were saying. And how the anchoring, to that anchor, what is the need of a person who is progressing are different. How it can be catered to, rather than the anchor getting frozen, where that interface becomes dysfunctional, then either exit or either you conform or exit kind of a non-negotiable thing.
Loyalty or exit.
Yeah, that's one aspect we explored.
Yeah. The issue is that usually, and it's getting more and more coded this way as in recent times, that my previous level of growth, whatever it is, has somehow got to be looked at negatively for my next level of growth to happen types. Right? And if that kind of thing comes in, it's very self-destructive. Yeah, that's happening in many ways, and at a macro level, it has very many consequences which are quite negative and all of that. So, in any teaching like this, the idea of growing and evolving is inherent, right? And therefore, in a sense, that Shadanga chakra that I was talking about, so that's the chakra also, that you say that this is dharmic and sukha, and you get caught and you go to adharmic, then dvesha comes in the middle, and then there's all of this kind of thing. So how do we work with this in such a way that this can be minimized? Because what we were saying is it's almost impossible that for you to grow from one level to another, unless you look at this level and say there's something dissatisfactory about this level for me, why should I even put in the effort to move out of here?
One image that comes to my mind, I don't know if that was a helpful way to engage this, is the concentric circles. And can the learning process be positioned as a going deeper and deeper within myself and an expansion to a larger self? Sorry?
So the metaphor is constantly going in, going out, going in, going out kind of a thing, rather than...
And not just going in, but going together. I mean, you're also deepening and expanding. So it's a concentric circles thing,
so
rather than a higher and a lower.
If I have to exhale fully, I have to inhale fully types.
Yeah, and also from the position of... Also from the position of very similar to that, in fact, like you said, I have to view my current space as being bad or being a certain kind for me to want to go to the next level. Can I not say, here is a space and I'm here and I am, a certain proportion or a certain size, but there is potential for more. I mean, there is an inherent need for growth and urge for growth in every human being, right? So rather than us viewing it as, this is not good enough or this is bad, move to the next level, can I not say yes, it's there, but there is potential for so much more. You have so much more space in which you can be and live.
Our question was, how do we look at the yoga or in other forms of meditative practices contributing towards individual wholeness and process work contributing to collective wholeness, and how can these together facilitate the group and the individual? So that was our brief. And I think the metaphor that she's just talked about was our starting point of inhale and exhale fully. So that the whole individual wholeness is a given and a basic, must, crucial first step, has to happen, non-negotiable. and the participants shared the experience that when we receive individually, we automatically want to give back to the community. So the concept of doing seva, say in the Vipassana framework. So, so that inhale-exhale metaphor we can hold in our mind. So the community becomes a way of, for example, in the individual sadhana, I'm deepening in myself, but I don't have any frames of reference as to where I'm going directionally. Am I just, And the group setting in the process workspace gives me those mirrors in the participants and the facilitator to really experience, and so that is also a deepening of myself and individual wholeness. And thus we felt that it was not, one of the views was that is it a continuum where some people may start from the individual end and find the group process useful for reflections and being mirrored. Some people may not be able to start with meditation themselves. They're so entangled that you can't ask them to first do your individual work and come, right? So they would start and get de-entangled in the process space, but should be encouraged to walk the individual journey and not just be dependent on that. So then we went into saying that the process space itself is, it's both, that you're doing the seva and thereby you're growing and individually becoming whole. And so there's not, a dichotomy of the continuum, but it's in the one. And as an individual sadhak or as a rishi sitting in a mountain, it may look like I'm not engaged in the community, but by my effort of raising myself and consciousness, there is a change that happens. So not to look at collective wholeness only as an action actively, but just by working on myself, I am contributing to the collective. So that was a deeper understanding which we arrived at. Then we came to the question of how do we make this sustainable? Does it happen that sometimes we fall off the individual practice or the collective? We have said people are not coming back, after their, say, initial euphoria and excitement. So one was that people may not necessarily have slipped off just because they may no longer, say, come to a process space, means they may be carrying their individual journeys through other things that work for them, and we should be comfortable to let that happen. And, for example, if process work were to die out, so to speak, because if the society will feel the need, that will sustain. Examples were again reinforcing basically the whole individual work that, say, Vivekananda, when he wanted to go and help people, was told by Ramakrishna that, first just sit and work on yourself. And equally the Buddha or Krishnamacharya who said, no, transformation of society, I need to give back. So those were some of the examples that we shared in the context of the individual work being crucial, contributing back to collective. Then the question we raised was not just a collective's definition as the process workspace, but organizations, because a group is not just a group in a process lab or a process space, but how do we impact this in the organizational context? And then a lot of angst was shared about what's all wrong with the organizations and current OD, and how 95% is really stemming from rajas and commercial interests, and not just money, but ambition. Even NGOs are setting their targets in terms of, 25,000 poor people I've touched, so now I must touch 35,000 poor people. And so it's a constant acquisition mode, even if you're non-profit. So it's not just the money acquisition. And then, one of the views was they should actually look at making themselves redundant, that no poor people should be. So can we reframe people's targets and values in those senses? I think the nub of the debate was what's the objective with which these organizations are working, and can wholeness become a part of their vocabulary? Because currently organizations do have values, whether they're lived or not becomes all subsidiary to commercial interests. There is a lot of talk of consciousness, responsibility, CSR, you have your little NGO which you support and you feel you're giving back to society, but that's just a shift in language. There has not been a shift in purpose. And can wholeness as a purpose be introduced into the organizational context, and can process workers with their kind of reach and impact in organizational settings be those channels to embed the idea of wholeness, because that's really what yoga is looking at, everything to make you, sort of a more expanded whole.
Now, after listening to everybody except the first group, which is kind of doable within the present context of process work, which is you can add a module or something like that. It just strikes me listening to the rest of you that maybe, if this is to be taken forward like a lab or something like that, it can only be taken forward as a lab in which people who have already done a process lab can come, and people who've done some amount of work with themselves can come. It can never be first time or whatever. I mean, I'm just thinking. There is a prerequisite, because everybody is talking about certain kinds of prerequisites which are impossible to create in a first time experience.